I was standing in the middle of the crowded international airport, gripping the handle of my little suitcase as if letting go would make me disappear entirely, when I heard my son-in-law whisper, just loud enough for the words to slice through the noise, "Just walk faster. She'll fall behind." At first, I didn't believe what I'd heard. Surely he couldn't mean me. Surely my own family wouldn't. But then they did exactly that. My daughter, her husband, and even my 2 teenage grandsons moved ahead in the line with a sudden, unnatural urgency, weaving between people as though I were no one to them. Not the woman who had raised my daughter through every storm life threw at us. Not the grandmother who never missed a birthday, a graduation, a single milestone. I called out their names gently at first, convinced they simply hadn't heard me over the airport chaos. But as the space between us grew, my voice rose, trembled, cracked. No one turned. No one slowed. Only my own echo answered me, swallowed by the shuffling of feet and the hum of rolling luggage. I watched them reach the immigration counter. I watched my daughter glance over her shoulder, and for a brief second, our eyes met. Her expression wasn't one of surprise or confusion. It was guilt, cold, sharp, quickly buried beneath annoyance. And then she turned her head away. Just like that. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was abandonment in its purest, cruelest form. My boarding pass slipped from my shaking fingers. A stranger behind me picked it up, leaned forward, and asked softly, "Are you all right, I forced a smile, the kind you practice when your heart has learned to hide. I told her I was fine, but inside, something was splintering, and something else was awakening. Because this wasn't just them leaving me behind. They left me behind after spending my money, the money I had saved over decades of sacrifices, to book the entire family trip. Money they promised they would return. Money they knew I couldn't easily give. And as I stood there, watching them disappear past the immigration desk, a strange stillness washed over me. It wasn't the helpless kind. It was the quiet, precise anger of a woman who has finally understood the truth. The kind that whispers that this moment, as painful as it is not the end. It's the beginning. Stay with me till the end, because what happened next shocked even me. And if you love emotional revenge stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. But right then, abandoned among strangers, I had no idea that betrayal would become the turning point of my life. And I certainly didn't expect fate to place an unexpected opportunity directly in my path. "Excuse me," a voice behind me said. "Is this your passport? Also, you might want to hear this." And the next words out of that stranger's mouth changed everything. "My name is Clara Whitmore, and this is my story." Before that fateful day at the airport, my life had been a quiet rhythm of small joys, family routines, and hard-earned stability. I'm Clara Whitmore, a grandmother in my early 70s, and I spent decades building a home filled with warmth and love. My daughter, Amanda, was my pride and joy, and though she had her quirks, I believed we shared an unbreakable bond. Every morning, I would wake early to the soft hum of the coffee machine, making 2 cups, one for me, one for Amanda, when she came down from her room. My grandsons, Jake and Tyler, would shuffle into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from their eyes, always greeted with my teasing about their hair or their perpetually mismatched socks. Evenings were sacred. We'd gather around the dinner table, sharing stories from our day, laughing over silly mishaps, celebrating small victories. I worked part-time as a freelance editor, which allowed me to stay involved with the world outside our home but never take me too far from my family. It was a careful balance, and I cherished the independence it gave me. Over the years, I had quietly saved for a special family trip, an overseas vacation Amanda had dreamed about for years. When I announced that I had booked first-class tickets for all 4 of us, their excitement was genuine. At least, I thought it was. I noticed small signs, little sparks of impatience or mild complaints, but I brushed them off. Amanda had always been impulsive, Tyler stubborn, and Jake easily influenced by his older brother. I told myself it was normal family dynamics. Still, there were fleeting moments when I felt a twinge of unease, Amanda's sharp tone when she was tired, Jake's rolling eyes when I asked him to help with his bag, but I attributed them to teenage moods, never betrayal. I also had friends, longtime neighbors, colleagues, and a small circle who called me the glue of our family. They noticed how proud I was of Amanda and the boys, how I always put their happiness before my own. I believed this was the life I had earned: love, respect, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. And yet, as I stood in that airport months later, it became painfully clear that appearances could be deceiving. The laughter around my dinner table, the cheerful mornings, even the promises of gratitude, they were fragile, like glass, and one careless hand could shatter them. At the time, I had no inkling that the very people I loved most would soon reveal their true colors, leaving me to face a betrayal that would turn my world upside down. Micro cliffhanger: little did I know that the foundation of my family, the life I had so carefully built, was about to crack in ways I could never have imagined. The first warning signs were subtle, almost easy to dismiss. It wasn't a dramatic fight or a shouting match, it was the little things, moments that made my stomach tighten in ways I couldn't yet name. I remember the morning we were packing for the trip. I had carefully labeled each suitcase, checked passports twice, and made a list of essentials. Amanda glanced at my meticulous plan and sighed, "Mom, you really don't have to stress so much. We can handle ourselves." Her words should have been comforting, but the tone, the faint edge of annoyance, made my chest tighten. Later, when I suggested checking the boys' passports and travel documents together, she brushed it off with a casual, "I've got it, Mom. Don't worry." At the time, I smiled, believing she was taking responsibility. But beneath her polite words was a subtle dismissal of my effort, a signal that my presence, my oversight, wasn't as necessary as I had thought. Even the grandsons, usually affectionate and polite, began showing cracks. Tyler, who once held my hand in public or asked for my opinion on small decisions, now rolled his eyes when I offered guidance, muttering under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. Jake started snapping back, answering questions with clipped phrases and a tone that carried a strange, almost learned impatience. At first, I chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion. But the combination of their dismissiveness and Amanda's impatience began to weigh on me. Then there were moments of exclusion. Amanda and her husband would make plans or discuss trip details in hushed tones, assuming I wasn't listening, speaking over me as if I were just a background character in my own family. When I tried to interject, they'd nod politely but continue without acknowledging my input. Every time it happened, a tiny knot of hurt formed in my chest. I wondered if I was imagining things, or if I was finally noticing cracks that had always been there, quietly widening. One evening, as I laid out the itinerary, Amanda glanced at her husband and whispered something I didn't catch. They both laughed, sharing a look I couldn't decipher, and I felt an unfamiliar sting. They were bonding over something I wasn't part of. I forced myself to laugh along, hiding the flicker of unease in my chest. But the unease stayed, like a quiet echo. Internal monologue. Was I overthinking? Was I too sensitive? Or had I finally glimpsed a part of my family I hadn't wanted to see? Micro cliffhanger. I didn't yet realize that these small dismissals were not random, they were rehearsal, a subtle orchestration of what was to come. The betrayal was already in motion, hidden behind polite smiles and half-whispered jokes. It wasn't long before the subtle dismissals turned into behavior I couldn't ignore. Amanda's smiles began to feel rehearsed, her politeness strained, and her eyes, once warm, now held a calculating edge. Her husband, David, was no longer just her partner. He seemed to feed off her subtle manipulations, nodding knowingly at things I couldn't yet understand. Together, they had developed a rhythm, a quiet conspiracy that I was only beginning to sense. The first time I truly doubted myself was during a discussion about the trip's expenses. I had saved for years, every extra shift, every freelance project, all to give my family a luxurious experience they'd remember. When I casually mentioned this, Amanda's response was chillingly casual. "Oh, Mom, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out." Her tone implied my contribution wasn't significant, that my sacrifices were invisible, even irrelevant. David's smirk as he leaned against the counter made my stomach twist. He wasn't hiding his amusement at my naivety. There were moments when I caught them whispering in corners, exchanging glances that spoke louder than words. One night, as I prepared the boys' passports, Amanda leaned over and muttered, "Don't get too attached to the idea of everything going smoothly." Her words were almost playful, but the undertone was unmistakable. She knew more than she was letting on. For the first time, I felt a cold shiver of suspicion. The boys, too, had begun to mirror their mother's behavior. Jake would deliberately misplace his documents and then roll his eyes when I found them, while Tyler started subtly undermining my suggestions, questioning my memory and competence. It was as if they had been coached to make me feel uncertain, to make me doubt my own judgment. And I did. I questioned myself constantly. Had I been too controlling? Too cautious? Or was there truly a growing darkness in the people I loved most? Internal monologue, every instinct screamed that something was wrong, yet I tried to rationalize it. I told myself that families argued, that teenagers rebelled, that in-laws could be tactless. But deep down, I felt the undeniable pull of betrayal, a tightening in my chest that refused to be ignored. Micro cliffhanger. One evening, as I overheard Amanda and David on a phone call, their words cut through the air like ice. She'll never see it coming. First class all the way, but she won't be joining us. That moment made my blood run cold. They weren't just dismissive, they were planning something deliberate. And I was still blind to the full extent. After the first hints of betrayal, the tension grew quietly but relentlessly. I found myself retreating into silence, pretending everything was fine while my heart ached with a loneliness I had never experienced before. Simple daily routines, making coffee, tidying up the house, even checking in with friends, felt hollow, as if a shadow had fallen over the warmth I once felt. The smiles I offered my family became masks, hiding the storm of confusion and hurt inside me. I tried to talk to Amanda, gently probing, "Is everything all right? You seem distant." She would force a smile, brush me off with a casual, "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry about me," but I could see it in her eyes, a flicker of impatience, even annoyance, that cut deeper than words ever could. Even the boys, who once looked to me for guidance, now shrugged or muttered excuses whenever I sought their attention. The home I had built felt suddenly cold, echoing with the absence of genuine warmth. Internal monologue, I kept asking myself if I was imagining it, if I had become overly sensitive with age. Was it normal for my own daughter to make me feel invisible, for my grandsons to ignore the woman who had raised them? The more I questioned myself, the heavier the weight of betrayal became. I began to notice little betrayals piling up, promises broken without explanation, conversations I wasn't included in, and sly remarks that left me doubting my own memory. Once, I overheard Amanda laughing about a private joke with her husband, and my heart sank. Was I no longer part of their world? The silence of my home at night became unbearable, amplifying every moment I had been dismissed, overlooked, and quietly humiliated. Every glance in the mirror reflected a woman battling a growing storm of doubt and sorrow. I cried in secret, hating that my tears felt both futile and cathartic. I began journaling obsessively, pouring my confusion and pain onto pages no one would read. It was there, in those quiet moments of solitude, that I realized the betrayal wasn't just hurtful, it was deliberate, calculated, and profoundly personal. Micro cliffhanger. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "Don't forget, the trip is in 2 days. Make sure you're ready." But reading it, I felt not anticipation, but a sinking dread. The facade of family excitement was cracking, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment at the airport was coming closer with every passing second. In the days leading up to the trip, the betrayal transformed from subtle neglect to open cruelty. Amanda's politeness had vanished entirely, replaced by sharp, clipped tones and deliberate dismissals. Her husband, David, now openly mocked my suggestions, making offhand comments about my old-fashioned way of planning and packing. The boys, once shy and playful, mirrored this attitude, whispering jokes behind my back and rolling their eyes when I entered the room. Every interaction became a test of my patience, and I realized with a sinking heart that they were not only ignoring me, they were actively undermining me. Internal monologue. How could the people I loved most treat me like this? I had raised Amanda with care, sacrificed for her, and supported her through every milestone. And now, here I was, invisible in my own home. The realization was both painful and infuriating. The first major twist came when I discovered that David had intercepted some of my emails, messages, and even my banking notifications. He had been manipulating information to make it appear that I was forgetful or careless, setting me up to look incompetent, even to myself. Amanda seemed complicit, feigning concern while subtly fueling my self-doubt. They had created a narrative in which I was unreliable, a burden, and anything I had done to prepare for the trip was now being used against me. I remember one particular afternoon, I had carefully arranged the boys' luggage in the car, labeling each bag and checking weight limits, only to find David had repacked everything haphazardly and Amanda glaringly pointed out, "Mom, you really need to let us handle things." "You're overcomplicating everything." The sting of humiliation was immediate. Not only had they ignored my efforts, but they made me feel foolish for even trying. Another cruel twist hit when I realized they had subtly manipulated the trip's finances. The money I had saved for months, the first-class tickets, the hotel reservations, they had been booked using my funds, yet every mention of gratitude was absent. Instead, I was treated as if my generosity was expected, unremarkable, or worse, annoying. The deliberate coldness, the laughter shared behind my back, the feeling of being an outsider in my own family, it all piled up like a mountain pressing down on me. Micro cliffhanger. One evening, as I overheard Amanda whisper to David, "Tomorrow will be perfect. She won't see it coming," a chill ran through me. Their plan was no longer subtle. The abandonment at the airport, the humiliation I had felt, was no accident. I understood, with horrifying clarity, that I was about to be left behind, alone, at the very moment I expected to share in joy. And that realization ignited something within me, a spark of anger that refused to be extinguished. The day arrived faster than I anticipated. The suitcases were packed, the itinerary printed, and the excitement in the house felt like a fragile bubble about to burst. I had tried to tell myself that maybe, just maybe, things would go smoothly. But the tension in Amanda's forced smiles and David's barely concealed smirks made my heart sink with every passing second. The boys were unusually quiet, exchanging glances that I now recognized as conspiratorial. My instincts, honed over decades of life experience, screamed that this was no ordinary family trip. We arrived at the airport, and I carried my carefully packed suitcase, balancing both hope and unease. I tried small talk, attempting to break the tension, but Amanda's responses were curt. David's laughter at a private joke with the boys made me shrink into myself, feeling increasingly invisible. As we approached the immigration lines, I noticed the subtle quickening of their pace. My stomach twisted. I called Amanda softly, "Are we all set?" Wait, but my words were swallowed by the bustling terminal. And then it happened. David leaned forward and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Just walk faster. She'll fall behind." It was a cruel, deliberate nudge, a signal that the abandonment was about to unfold. Amanda and the boys moved ahead without hesitation, weaving through the crowd as if I were a stranger. I called their names louder, my voice cracking with disbelief and hurt, but the only reply was the echo of my own desperation. Internal monologue. This cannot be happening. After everything, after all the years of care, love, and sacrifice, they were choosing to leave me behind. I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of humiliation, disbelief, and rising fury. How could they betray me so openly, so intentionally? I rushed forward, my hands trembling, only to see Amanda glance back once, cold, guilty, annoyed, and then deliberately turn away. The boys followed, their eyes averted, as if trained to ignore my presence. My suitcase slipped slightly from my grasp, and I fumbled to steady it. A kind stranger noticed, crouched down, and handed me my boarding pass. "Are you all right, she asked gently. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, a storm was raging. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This was not an accident, a misunderstanding, or a moment of chaos. They had orchestrated it. They had planned to abandon me at the airport, using my own money to fund the entire trip, laughing behind my back, confident that I would be powerless and humiliated. And yet, as the anger surged, a strange, calm clarity took hold. This was the moment I knew I had to do something. Micro cliffhanger. As I tried to steady my breath, a voice whispered behind me, startling me completely. "Excuse me, is this your passport? Also, you might want to hear this." I turned, curiosity and dread warring inside me, and that stranger's next words would set in motion a plan my family could never have imagined. Narrator reflection. The betrayal had reached its peak, and I felt every ounce of my life experience crystallizing into resolve. This wasn't just humiliation, it was the breaking point. And from this moment, everything would change. The moment the stranger's words sank in, a clarity I hadn't felt in years coursed through me. The betrayal, the humiliation, the deliberate cruelty, they were not just acts of selfishness, they were opportunities. Opportunities to reclaim my dignity, to turn the tables on the people who thought they could dismiss me without consequence. I felt a cold, deliberate calm settle over me, a precision that replaced the chaos of my earlier despair. Internal monologue. they think I'm powerless. They think my age, my kindness, my patience make me invisible. But they forgot one thing: I've spent a lifetime observing, calculating, and understanding people. And now, I would use that knowledge not for vengeance born of malice, but for justice earned through cleverness. I began with small moves. While they enjoyed the airport lounge and prepared for the flight they assumed I would never take, I quietly reorganized their plans. I contacted the airline, explaining the situation, emphasizing their deliberate abandonment and misuse of my funds. Simultaneously, I ensured my first-class ticket remained intact. With the right timing, I knew the humiliation could be reversed, this time with me in control. Step by step, their smug confidence became my tool. I let them proceed, thinking they had won, while I set every domino in place. Boarding passes, hotel reservations, seating arrangements, all subtly adjusted to reflect their own arrogance. When they finally discovered the outcome, the shock and disbelief mirrored the feelings I had endured at the airport just hours earlier. Their laughter vanished, replaced by stammering, scrambling apologies, and bewildered stares. Internal monologue: this isn't cruelty. This is balance. This is reclaiming what was stolen and demonstrating that betrayal carries consequences. They will remember this lesson not just for the embarrassment, but for the realization that I am not to be underestimated. By the time I boarded my own first-class flight, the roles had reversed. I looked back at them in the terminal as they tried to make sense of the chaos they had created for themselves. Their eyes met mine, a mixture of guilt, shock, and disbelief, while I sat tall, calm, and entirely composed. The empowerment I felt was intoxicating. Micro cliffhanger, and as the plane doors closed behind me, I knew this was only the beginning. What they had done would stay with them, etched into memory, while I moved forward, not bitter, but victorious, knowing that justice, cleverly executed, can be more powerful than rage. By the time the dust settled, the consequences of their actions were unavoidable. Amanda and David were forced to confront the mess they had created, not just with the airline and hotel, but within their own conscience. Their carefully constructed facade of control crumbled when the staff confirmed my tickets, my accommodations, and my rightful access to the first-class experience. Every attempt they made to shift blame only highlighted their own deceit, leaving them exposed and flustered in ways they had never anticipated. Internal monologue: seeing them scramble, hearing their frantic explanations, I felt no joy in cruelty, only a quiet satisfaction that truth had found its way to the surface. They had assumed I would remain powerless, humiliated, and alone. Instead, I had turned the situation on its head, proving that intentional betrayal carries consequences beyond what the betrayers ever imagine. Even the boys, who had once followed their parents' lead without question, were forced to see the reality of their behavior. Their whispered apologies and awkward attempts at reconciliation were met with calm acknowledgement, not anger. I let them feel the weight of what they had done, giving them the chance to reflect while I maintained my dignity. The airport, once a place of abandonment and heartbreak, had become the stage for justice. I boarded my flight with a sense of empowerment, my head held high, leaving behind the humiliation and stepping into a space of control and self-respect. The experience taught them and reminded me of the importance of integrity, respect, and the consequences of underestimating someone's resolve. Micro cliffhanger: as the plane took off, I gazed out the window, watching the terminal fade below, and realized that this journey was more than a trip. It was a turning point. They had lost their advantage, and I had regained my power. And deep down, I knew that the story of this day would forever linger in their minds as a lesson they could not erase. Looking back, the experience taught me something profound. Betrayal, no matter how close it comes from, is never a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of the other person's character. I learned that patience, love, and sacrifice are powerful, but self-respect and assertiveness are equally essential. I also realized that true strength often comes quietly, in moments when the world expects you to crumble. Internal monologue: never underestimate yourself, never ignore your instincts, and never allow anyone, even family, to treat you as invisible or expendable. Life may hand you moments of humiliation or pain, but within those moments lies the opportunity to reclaim your dignity and rewrite the narrative on your own terms. Now, I stand with clarity, wisdom, and peace. Amanda, David, and even the boys had their lessons, and I moved forward with my life unshaken, knowing I had turned heartbreak into empowerment. And to all of you watching, remember, Your kindness is your strength, but your awareness is your shield. Protect yourself, trust your instincts, and never let betrayal define you. If you loved this story of betrayal, resilience, and first-class revenge, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, true-to-life stories that prove sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected ways.